But one of the things I wanted to hit on was like I see, and I'm sure you do or your team does, like there are a lot of people who take, I'll use the term fake gurus, but a lot of people who haven't achieved, a 100th of the level of success that you have, that take a lot of shots and at you and, a lot specifically around your views on debt, but sometimes just in general. And, we have a big belief at acquisition.com that the only people who ever hate you are never ahead of you. And I feel like that's been extremely true, and it's been tough for people to be ahead of you in general. But I just want to give context for my audience that, number one, you've been doing this for 3 decades?
Yeah, a little over, yeah.
3 decades. And your overnight 3-decade success.
Yeah, for real.
And,
just in time to get old.
And what I'm going to be directing the conversation today around is actually around business stuff. So Dave has a zillion things on personal finance. I mean, I think that was the wedge product that built
Absolutely
a lot of everything. But because our audience is predominantly business owners, I want to focus on the actual building of Ramsey Solutions and kind of some of the things that you learned along the way, some of the big mistakes that you did, some things that you'd go back in time and would have done differently. And even as you've kind of scaled the brand. So that's kind of the direction.
Okay.
Does that work?
Sure.
Okay. So can you give a little bit of background in terms of how Ramsey Solutions, the education business, which was the first business, correct?
They've all kind of evolved together.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that come to be? And then what was your thinking around the business model at that time? And like, what has it evolved into?
Yeah. Well, all of it started extremely primitive. I mean, like 1 + 1 = 2 barely, kind of thing. And so, like, for instance, we started, I went down, there's a talk radio show, or a talk radio station in Nashville at the time that was in Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And there was a guy doing a bad financial show, like a Saturday Night Live skit, on there. I went on as a guest on the bad financial show, and I didn't have any books. I just went on for fun. I was actually promoting a real estate club I was in. And he said, "Hey, I hear you're helping people with with foreclosures and helping them stop getting their car repoed, or if they're having financial trouble over at your church. Are you doing that?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm just kind of doing that for fun, just to help folk as a ministry at the church." And he goes, "Well, if you got any questions about that, call up." And phone rang, and he never got any phone calls. He didn't know what to do. He didn't even know how to put the guy on the air. And so he said, "Hey, come back. Let's do that again," because his phone never rings. And so I did it like 2 times, and then he quit. And then we went down and talked that guy that was running that station into letting us work for free. And so a couple guys, me and a couple other guys, went on the air answering questions in a really heavy hillbilly twang. WWTN, you're talking Nashville, y'all call in. I mean, it was nasty, buddy. I'm telling you, it was nasty. And but the information was good, and the phone rang from the very first day. At about the same time, I had finished writing on my laptop in my living room on the very first version of Windows. This is 1992, my first book, and I self-published it, carried it home in the trunk of my car, got 1,000 copies, and I went on the radio and said, "Hey, y'all get my book," and some people did, and the 18 months later, to get to your question, we moved the card table out of my living room and one old beat-up desk from the days when I went bankrupt, and opened an office in an 800 square foot month-to-month rent. And me and another guy, and the other guy was going to do financial coaching the way I teach to do that. I was going to continue to do that, and we launched in April of 1994 a class on how to handle money. It was actually how to avoid bankruptcy. And one of the lessons was on the different types of bankruptcy. One of the lessons was on how to stop a foreclosure, if it's an FHA, if it's a VA, or if it's Fannie Mae, different processes to stop a foreclosure. And, all these different things. And the people that came weren't bankrupt. They were just making a lot of money and spending it all.
Oh, okay.
So they were broke. It was all the money comes in, all the money goes out, only the names are changed to protect the innocent. But they weren't behind on their house payment.
Right.
They just were fighting with each other in their marriage, and they didn't know how to do a budget, and no one ever told them about insurance. So I took the bankruptcy and the foreclosure lesson out and replaced it with a retirement lesson, and here's how investments work lesson, compound interest, whoa, and which is, still for the general public causes their brains to just go melt down in a wonderful way the first time you see compound interest, right? Yeah. And so, that was called Life After Debt in April. And 4 people came the first night. I sold 3 of them. So for you digital people, I had a 75% conversion rate set up, right? But I'm telling you, it was primitive. Overhead projector, bad suit, that whole thing. And then we changed it to called it Financial Peace University 5 months later in September, 6 months later. And now Financial Peace University's had 10 million people go through it, and 50,000 churches have taught it.
Unbelievable. So for context, the services that you had was education with some level of service, kind of like holding accountable or keeping them consistent on top of that. Which the reason that I was really intent on talking to you was that in the space that we're in today, and obviously the marketplace has changed a lot, you have an education business. And I would say that the vast majority of, quote, education businesses are not perceived as legitimate. How do you think you've been able to anchor in it? Like it's very clear that Ramsey Solutions is a legitimate business, obviously. But why do you think that so many of them are not perceived that way? Like what's the gap? What are people missing there?
I honestly don't know. I know that in the financial world in general, and I think most of your listeners and you and I will agree to this, that there's a lot of us. I grew up in that world, and I'm a nerd by nature and got a degree in finance, for God's sakes. And so in other words, I thought the way to fix everything was with the math. And math treats the symptom, right, not the problem. And